Joining us now for World Brief and the review of some of the headlines of today's newspapers from around the world is our darling Ijebu princess, whose kingmakers are yet to take a decision. I'm trying to introduce Adefemi Akinsanya. Good morning.
Good morning, Dr. Rubin. Don't worry. That Fushegura family house, eventually they'll be able to produce a king. We're hoping for, before Judeoba, we'll be celebrating with the new king. We hope so. Hopefully. Good morning, Rufai. Good morning, Ayo.
We can't wait to have the king.
We can't. Long live the king, whoever they choose. Yeah. All righty, good morning to you viewers. Let me tell you what is happening around the world. Now, before we actually continue, it has been announced that the first repatriation flight from Oman, which is the first flight out of the Middle East for the United Kingdom, has been announced. So for people who are in Oman, British people who want to get on those flights, that has just been announced. But aside from that, the conflict between Iran and Israel and the United States has entered its fifth day and continues to intensify, with fresh waves of missile and drone strikes reported across the Middle East. Now, the humanitarian toll is mounting. Iranian authorities say at least 787 people have been killed since the start of the campaign, while a mass funeral has been held for the victims of a devastating strike on a girls' primary school in the southern city of Minab, one of the deadliest incidents of the war, which killed well over 100 people, many of them children. Now, this conflict is also widening geographically. In Dubai, the United Arab Emirates, a suspected Iranian drone struck the car park next to the US consulate. It sparked a fire that was extinguished and caused no reported injuries, but it is again another example of this escalation. Meanwhile, tensions are growing between Western allies. So you see, US President Donald Trump has sharply criticized British Prime Minister Keir Starmer, saying the UK, essentially the United Kingdom's response shows that this is not Churchill we are dealing with. Now, after London initially refused to allow American strikes to be launched from British bases. Now, regarding the Chagos Islands, specifically Diego Garcia's airbase, Trump did complain about this Chagos Islands leasing snag that forced extra flight hours, as Starmer earlier denied access to Diego Garcia and RAF Rainford in Gloucestershire. Well, to wrap this all up, let's take a listen to what Trump had to say about Keir Starmer.
And I'm not happy with the UK either. That island that you read about, the lease, he made it for whatever reason, he made a lease of the island. Somebody came and took it away from him. And it's taken 3-4 days for us to work out where we can land there. It would have been much more convenient landing there as opposed to flying many extra hours. So we are very surprised. This is not Winston Churchill that we're dealing with. And so has UK. Now, the second one is shocking, but this is not the age of Churchill. I will say the UK has been very, very uncooperative with that stupid island that they have, that they gave away and took a 100-year lease, having to do with perhaps indigenous people claiming the island that never even saw the island before. What's that all about? And they ruin relationships. It's a shame.
Well, despite that dispute, the United Kingdom is reinforcing its military presence in the region, deploying the Type 45 destroyer HMS Dragon and counter-drone helicopters to Cyprus in order to defend its air bases there. And that was after Iranian-linked drone attacks. The United Kingdom is getting active. Meanwhile, President Trump also said that he is going to cut off all US trade with Spain, citing disagreements over NATO defense spending and the use of Spanish military bases to strike Iran. Well, let's move on now, because US Senator Lindsey Graham has praised recent United States attacks on Iran and also warned that communist-ruled Cuba could soon face similar pressure from Washington. As we know, a January 29th executive order signed by Donald Trump labeled Cuba an unusual and extraordinary threat to the United States' national security and foreign policy interests. Now, the order established a national emergency framework enabling Washington to expand punitive measures and increase economic and diplomatic pressure on the Cuban government. Now, Cuban officials have accused Washington of trying to destabilize the government as the country grapples with a deepening fuel and economic crisis. And then we come over to the United Nations, because the race to succeed Antonio Guterres has officially widened as former Senegalese President Macky Sall has been formally submitted his candidacy for the position of United Nations Secretary General. Now, Burundi has officially notified the United Nations of Sall's nomination, fulfilling the requirement that a member state must sponsor any individual vying for the world body's top diplomatic post. Now, this move carries significant weight as it was submitted by Burundian President Evariste Ndayishimiye himself in his capacity as the current chairperson of the African Union. And this signals a unified continental support for Sall's bid. Now, Macky Sall himself, who led Senegal from 2012 to 2024, does join a growing field of high-profile candidates in a selection process that is increasingly focused on transparency and regional rotation. Now, the position traditionally rotates among global regions, but there's a strong push this cycle for a representative from either Latin America or Africa, especially as the United Nations faces calls to appoint its first ever female leader. Now, Sall's entry follows the formal nomination of Argentine diplomat Rafael Grossi, who is the current head of the International Atomic Energy Agency, and the former Chilean president Michelle Bachelet, who has received joint backing from China, Brazil, and Mexico. We'll see what happens then. Well, let's move on to our newspaper headlines across the globe. And as always, we begin here in Nigeria with the front page of This Day, the newspaper of record. And This Day does lead with news that the United States has asked its citizens to leave several Middle Eastern countries, and that's as the conflict with Iran escalates. This is following drone attacks and widening regional strikes. The paper also adds that oil prices have climbed to $85 per barrel amid supply disruption fears, while President Donald Trump says the war could last weeks. Now, This Day also reports here on the fact that the Nigerian Medical and Dental Council has found a prima facie case of medical negligence and professional misconduct in the death of Master Nkanu Adichie Esege, who is the son of Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie. Now, the paper says that 3 doctors were suspended and the matter referred to the disciplinary tribunal, while Eurocare Multi-Specialist Hospital defended its doctors and pledged cooperation with the authorities. Let's take a look at the New Telegraph this morning, because the New Telegraph this morning is also leading with the Middle Eastern crisis. The federal government has suspended all pilgrimages to Israel, and that's following escalating Middle Eastern issues, as we are well aware of. So the paper goes on to say that the Nigerian Christian Pilgrimage Commission announced the decision, citing safety concerns, while the Nigerians in the Diaspora Commission insist that authorities are monitoring the situation and will ensure the safe return of Nigerian evacuations if evacuations become necessary. Let's take a look at the Daily Independent this morning. The Daily Independent is reporting that petrol prices have surged to 960 naira a litre in Abuja, and here in Lagos, they have climbed to 935 naira. This is following US and Israeli strikes on Iran, with depot price adjustments by Dangote Petroleum Refinery triggering a ripple effect across retail outlets. Let's take a look at the Vanguard. The Vanguard is our next paper up this morning. And the Vanguard is reporting that President Bola Ahmed Tinubu has nominated Taiwo Oyedele as the Minister of State for Finance. He is replacing Dr. Doris Uzoka Anite, who has been redeployed to the Ministry of Budget and National Planning. That is marking her 3rd placement in 2 years, as she formerly was the Minister of Industry, Trade and Investment. And as aforementioned, she was the former Minister of State for Finance. Now, going back to Mr. Oyedele himself, he is the former chairman of the Presidential Committee on Fiscal Policy and Tax Reforms, and he's also a former PwC, that's PricewaterhouseCoopers partner, and his name has been forwarded to the Senate for confirmation. Well, we've got the Daily Trust up next, and the Daily Trust is leading with the fact that state congresses of the All Progressive Congress in Kaduna, Gombe, Kebbi, Taraba and Edo have all endorsed President Bola Ahmed Tinubu as the party's candidate for the 2027 election. And then we've got The Punch. The Punch is looking at tax. And so essentially what The Punch is reporting is that tax collections, VAT collections, have hit a record 1.08 trillion naira in January as a new sharing formula took effect. Now, 10% of those monies have been allocated to the federal government and 55% have been allocated to the states and 35% goes to local governments. We've got our international papers up next. Firstly, we've got the Financial Times, and the Financial Times is, of course, leading on oil and the energy crisis. So essentially, they're looking at the impact the Middle Eastern conflict has on energy prices, which the paper says has rattled global markets. And then we have the Metro this morning, which really stood out to me. Of course, you've got the picture of the mass funeral there, but also you've got Donald Trump saying that he's saying to Iran and Iranian leaders that it is too late to talk, it's too late to negotiate peace, claiming everything has been knocked out. That is according to the Metro's reporting. And then we've got the UK Guardian, because on the front page of the UK Guardian, we do see this picture again from that mass funeral of showing these Iranian women who are mourning at the mass funeral for the victims killed by the Israeli strike on a girls' primary school. So those are your newspaper headlines and your world brief. I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Okay. So I think we are seeing the hypocrisy of the Western media. Femi, cast your mind back. You remember Sandy Hook, when Sandy Hook happened?
Yes. Yeah, elementary school shooting.
Now juxtapose it with this. The Western media are pushing our eyes, Sandy Hook, Sandy Hook. If these over 100 and something kids that were killed were American kids, Jesus Christ, we will not hear what. But you can see, save for Guardian, nobody's taking it big deal. In fact, the argument now they've tried to make, which has been debunked, is the fact that, it was a military base. They've said, and they said it was Iranian fire that even caused it, but that has been debunked. So we're seeing the hypocrisy as it goes on. We all saw the tantrum Trump threw against Spain. And the only thing is a nation said, let me be a sovereign. You cannot drag me into a war. Mm-hmm. Because till date, America has not paid for the lives lost when they dragged the whole world to Afghanistan. For what it's worth, what did Trump say recently? When he was talking about Greenland, he said they have not even done anything. You remember that story led to a lot of servicemen that were injured in the war in Iraq to come out and say, how dare Trump say all of this? So in the end, like I keep repeating, like Hillary Clinton said, be wary of a man you can bait with a tweet. Then he's gone one step further. And you see, I don't know who advises him. He forgets that there's midterm coming up. Just today, you didn't take the story. Adam Clayton, when I left the house this morning, was leading in the Republican primaries for who is going to take the Republican seat for Senate in Texas. Mm-hmm. Senator Clayton. So when you look at that, and you have a stiff opposition coming up in either Crockett or Talarico.
Yes.
On the Democratic side. Yeah. Midterm is coming, you keep doing all of this. There are many issues on ground, and you're not thinking about it. And you had the F-100 say, crude oil prices can go up for a little bit. Mm-hmm. Not minding whatever can happen. Let's stop deceiving ourselves. As an African, I'm rooting for Macky Sall of Senegal. I hope he gets it, but he's under a very stiff opposition. You have Michelle Bachelet, which she has also done well. I think that's former president of Chile. She's done well for herself and also, but let the best man win. But I think since the days of Butrus Gali, it's time, and Kofi Annan, it's time that this thing comes back to Africa again. Dr. Abatiegbe Kiniewa, Awalukan. Africa looking for UN.
Africa rising, of course. I know we talk about the other candidates' competence and experience, but we are backing our African, hopeful at the United Nations, Macky Sall, and we'll keep our eye on that. And like you mentioned, Rufai, it's Africa's time. I believe that it's time for us to take on that seat. To what extent that if he does emerge, how that would influence or impact Africa's position in the United Nations would beg to see, because in the past, Africans occupying that position hasn't really done well or given us an advantage in that regard. So let's see if that would change in the event that he emerges as winner. But let me talk about the United Kingdom and Trump, especially Trump coming hard against Keir Starmer, saying he's no Churchill. What does this mean? We know that traditionally, when it comes to the United States and United Kingdom's relationship, they have been strong allies, and usually without questioning or hesitating. In the past, when a U.S. president would, launch strikes like this or attack another country, the United Kingdom would traditionally follow suit. It happened with Churchill, it happened with Tony Blair and Iraq, it happened with Margaret Thatcher, and these are strong figures in the United Kingdom's political history. And so that was almost a slap in the face for Keir Starmer, especially at a time when his leadership is coming under question. He has a lot of criticisms. He's stuttering on whether or not he will stay on as prime minister or not. It's quite a blow. However, locally, the leftists, 49% of whom are not in support of the drone strikes, seem to agree or stand with Keir Starmer on this one. Mm-hmm. However, his opponents, Nigel Farage, Kemi Badenoch, have taken that opportunity or leveraged this to come hard on him, saying that he should have taken a decision. He's indecisive. He ought to have come out to support. He's losing one of the United Kingdom's strongest allies in the area of the United States. But I must say that in a show of strength of leadership and moving away from comparisons, which has dogged his leadership, he's standing tall for what he believes in. Yeah. He's standing tall as a leader, and so he can speak up when another leader. They should do what they want to do. Yeah. This is his conviction. He's standing by it. Hopefully, he can defend it irrespective of what the fallout would be. But in truth, a number of leftists, which are his critical base, are in support of him and are against the drone attacks on Iran. So he might very well come out unscathed, but the opposition is going to attack based on this, and Trump is definitely going to come hard on him because of that.
Okay, let me start with the evacuation of nationals, which is one of the things that, you talked about. Now, the Americans have given the instruction following the attack on the U.S. consulate in Dubai that every American citizen should get out of that region. But they are not evacuating for obvious reasons. They're saying any available commercial flight, just get out. France has also sent not just a military vessel to protect its bases, it's also asking its citizens to get out. China has also done the same thing. The United Kingdom has not done direct evacuation, but it has said the British nationals that are in the Middle East should register with the UK.
Yes.
Over 100,000 of them have registered. Now, I brought up the point precisely to say that here in Nigeria, we have had some Nigerians who are in the Middle East who have approached NITCOM. That's the Nigerians in Diaspora Commission. But Nigeria, I don't think our embassies are not functioning in many of those places. The ambassadors are not there. We can't even pay electricity bills in many of our embassies. But I think Nigeria should also find a way around it. Yeah. We don't even have a register of the Nigerians that are in the Middle East. But Nigeria, apart from in responding to the distress calls, should also be seen to be doing something beyond travel advisory. Now, President Trump, in responding to Britain and Spain, I think there's some double standard there. He has said he will go after Spain. We don't want to trade with them again. Spain that cannot even pay 2% of its GDP in NATO, and was the only country, according to Trump, that opposed the proposal that contribution to NATO should be increased to 5%. Now they do their trade in 2025. Exports from the U.S. towards Spain was $21 billion. From Spain to the U.S. was $26 billion. But with the UK, which has refused the use of Diego Garcia and the military field in Gloucestershire, it is called, is not imposing any additional tariffs or sanctions on them. So there's that hypocrisy. However, the German Chancellor, meeting with Trump, had made it clear that you can't do business with the EU without carrying Spain along. Now, President Trump also says he's going to provide insurance relief. How he's going to do that, nobody has said so, beyond the fact that he's going to meet with the Energy Secretary and also the Secretary of the Treasury, Scott Bessent. Now, quickly on the United Nations. Now, Burundi now, whose president, Ndarimishie, is the chairman of the African Union, has supported the candidacy of Macky Sall, who was president of Senegal from 2012 to 2024. Now, when I read that story, my concern is, where is Nigeria? Why are we also not making a bid to replace Guterres, who is leaving in December 2026? We are very capable people here in Nigeria. We should be interested.
Who do you think Nigeria should nominate, Dr.
Amina was former deputy secretary.
But whoever becomes the next Secretary General will have to worry about reform and global peace.